Good morning, SHRM-Memphis. We're happy you are with us today. Thank you for joining our third virtual chapter event. We have a great program planned for you today and have lots of folks that want to share information with you. So without further ado, let's look at our agenda real quickly. You'll see that we're going to have a welcome and introduction from our president, Bridget Wilson, a mention of opportunities with our diversity and inclusion committee and programming, legal update, our featured presentation, and then we will make sure that we are dismissed right around 1 o'clock to let you get back to your schedule. So without further ado, let's turn it over to our president of SHRM-Memphis, our CEO, Bridget Wilson.
Good morning, everybody. Thank you, Kathy, for such a warm welcome. Again, my name is Bridget Wilson, and I'm the president of SHRM-Memphis, and I have the great opportunity to welcome you all to our June meeting. I do want to make sure that we let everyone know that SHRM-Memphis is here for our members, and we have a resource page on our COVID-19 that is being very useful with updated daily. Also, because of the social change that we're currently experiencing throughout the U.S., our diversity and inclusion team has created a resource, is working on a resource page where we'll have information for our members to get that information that they need. If you haven't had an opportunity, please make sure you you follow our new LinkedIn page, which is a page which is a company. So no more requesting to join our membership. All you have to do is click follow and you will get all those great updates, which we will be updating with our COVID-19 as well as our diversity and inclusion information. If you hadn't had a chance, also please make sure that you go to our website, our brand new website. It looks all nice and fancy. We want to hear your information, your feedback, and your thoughts on that. And of course, we do need volunteers for our great organization, specifically our workforce and development committee is looking for committee members. If you're interested in participating in workforce and development or have a little interest in that area, please reach out to our VP of Workforce Development, Brad Fetterman. Also, our board is looking for a few opportunities as well. Please go to our website and apply. We always need more support. Next, I would like to thank our wonderful sponsors. If it's not for them, we would not be able to provide you with this wonderful programming that we have. Again, thank you to our wonderful signature sponsors. And now I have the pleasure of introducing our VP of Diversity and Inclusion, Brandy Irving, for a Diversity and Inclusion news and announcements. Thank you.
Thank you, Bridget. I appreciate you introducing me to everybody. Good morning to everyone. I hope that everyone is safe during this time, and as we practice physical distancing and get more used to the Zoom meetings, I hope that everyone's doing well, especially as Tennessee moves into phase 2 and getting ready to move into phase 3 of reopening. I have the very great privilege of announcing to you that as part of the State Tennessee SHRM Conference, we will be launching the Diversity and Inclusion Conference on that November the 1st. For me, this will be my third time working on the conference and my first time leading the conference as the VP of Diversity and Inclusion. And I'm always excited to work on it, but this year, especially excited, but in a much more deliberate way. I think with the way that COVID-19 has changed the way that we're working, has changed the way that we're supporting our team members. And now with the racial tensions around the murder of George Floyd, we all have a very serious obligation as HR practitioners to help our companies be able to help our team members navigate through both COVID and now through all of the stress and trauma that especially our Black American team members are feeling as we have this overdue awakening to the racial discrimination that Black Americans have faced for so long. And we definitely, as a board and as a D&I group, we don't want to be tone deaf to what's going on in the country and tone deaf to what's going on with our team members. I think that we all, as citizens of the United States and citizens of the world, have a responsibility to work to make America better, to make our workplaces better places to work, and not only places that work better as well. So with that, I'm very excited to announce that we will be launching the SHRM State Conference on November 1 with a full day of programming dedicated to diversity and inclusion. It will be November the 1st from 1 to 5. The registration is already up. We're already promoting early bird registration. There will be 3 different ways you can register. You can register just for the SHRM State Conference. You can register for the SHRM State Conference and the Diversity and Inclusion Conference with a discounted price for the D&I conference, or you can register just for the Diversity and Inclusion Conference. Our theme this year is Leading Inclusively, Culture Empowering Organizations in Diverse Times. We definitely want to highlight the adversity that all of our companies are going through with COVID-19 and the adversity that specifically our African-American, Black American team members are going through as part of these racial tensions around the murder of George Floyd. We're going to have 4 to 5 different breakout sessions that will run twice concurrently, so there will be more offerings for those who attend. Also, we'll have a very special keynote speaker, and then we're going to close out with a very powerful, candid conversation with some leading VPs and executives from leading companies within the greater Mid-South area. So we're really excited about the program that we're putting forward. It is going to be one that will be very meaningful and that'll be very direct, but will also help us to be able to create a roadmap for where do we go from here. You know, how do we systemically in our cultures and our organizations address the areas that need to be addressed to be able to take the energy of today, the concerns of the day, and make them the actions of tomorrow. So please stay on the lookout for the communications. Please go to the website and register as soon as you can. And we are very excited about it. And if there's anyone who's interested in joining and working with us, please feel free to reach out to myself. And now I will turn it over to probably the most fun legal person that I've ever had the opportunity to work with, Mr. Jeff Weintraub.
That was a really good introduction. I appreciate it. I am Jeff Weintraub, and I am my board says I'm muted. I don't assume I'm not, Dr. Tuberville. Thank you. I am Jeff Weintraub. I'm a partner with Fisher Phillips. We're a management side labor and employment firm. We have 37 offices around the country, over 440 employment attorneys, and that is all we do. If you haven't checked out our COVID resources page, fisherphillips.com, it's absolutely amazing. Today, I'm going to talk about a topic in connection with our main speaker a little later. And so if you can advance that slide, please. I'm going to talk about teleworking, working remotely, as a reasonable accommodation under the ADA or the ADAA. So remember, our big question here is COVID-19 itself a disability under the ADA? That's the question that's kind of the lead in to everything I'm going to say in the next 4 or 5 minutes. In my view, the infection itself would not constitute a covered disability under the ADA unless it constitutes a substantial limitation on a major life activity. Remember, there is no duty to reasonably accommodate under the ADA unless there is a covered disability. So the question is, does it constitute a substantial limitation on a major life activity? Emphysema, is that a covered disability? Might be, might not be. It depends. What does it depend on? Whether it's a substantial limitation on a major life activity. A mild case of emphysema, probably not. A severe case that's a substantial limitation on breathing and so forth, yeah, that would be a covered disability. Slide, please. The EEOC quite coyly has resisted declaring whether being infected with the virus is itself an ADA disability. Why is that? Well, maybe it's because the agency wants to keep employers a little bit nervous about COVID-19, scared enough to where you won't do something precipitous, some adverse action, a termination of an individual who's infected. I don't really know. I don't have inside information on that. But again, COVID-19, in my view, does not itself constitute a covered disability. However, keep in mind, as with other impairments, if the impairment has physiological disorders arising from it, might be in the case of COVID-19, severe anxieties or heart disease or whatever, those can be covered disabilities under the ADA. So whether or not COVID-19 itself is ever declared by EEOC to be a covered disability really is not the point, because even if it's not, the other problems can arise from the impairment itself. So assuming, but keep in mind also, the EEOC has declared that COVID-19 is a direct threat under the ADA. So what does that mean? Well, what it means is that that's what allows employers, since this is a direct threat, to bar infected employees, positive tested employees from the workplace under various statutes. So just keep in mind that, hey, 6 months from now, if the CDC or state and local agencies decide it's no longer a serious threat, a direct threat, then all that may change and it may no longer be a direct threat under the ADA. So stay tuned. Most of y'all are going to be cautious, and you're going to treat the employee as if he or she has a covered disability, or where the employee has some other condition that itself constitutes a covered disability, then you're going to want to reasonably accommodate. Slide, please. So, as I mentioned in my last update, a couple of quick points. Remember that under the ADA, you're not required to reasonably accommodate covered disabilities. Okay, I'll let everybody get over the shock of that. Slide, please. What you are required to do is reasonably accommodate the limitations arising from those disabilities. So, for example, if an individual has a severe back impairment, you don't reasonably accommodate the back impairment, you reasonably accommodate his 10-pound lifting restriction. Secondly, slide please, you want to remember, be aware that under the ADA, all disabilities can be accommodated, or at least the limitations to those disabilities, keeping the slide short here. There are no exceptions. Slide please. The reality is that you only are required to accommodate reasonable. The only thing that's required under the ADA, while all disabilities can be accommodated, a total paraplegic can do a lifting job in a warehouse if you buy him a $10 million robot that he can operate with the pupil of his left eye. So everything can be accommodated. The only question is whether it's reasonable. And since that robot costs $10 million, I don't think that's going to be reasonable for anybody. Slide, please. So, working from home is a reasonable accommodation only, keyword, only, if all of the essential functions of the employee's job can be performed at home. It's not going to be required of you. It's not going to be a reasonable accommodation if there's even one essential function of the employee's job that can be performed at home. So what should that tell you? Have essential functions job descriptions. Otherwise, you're going to be in a little bit of a jam here. So, slide please. Here's what EEOC says about that, and I think it's right on, and I'll quote, an employer does not have to remove any essential job duties to permit an employee to work at home. Good sentence, underline it in your mind. However, it may need to reassign some minor job duties or marginal functions, non-essential functions of the job, if those functions can't be performed outside the workplace and they're the only obstacle to permitting an employee to work from home. And if you get the slides, I think this will be up on the website at some point. You can look that up. Slide, please. So thank you very, very much. And now I would like to take this opportunity to introduce my good friend, Dr. Kathy Tuberville. And I only have 25 minutes for this introduction, and it's really not enough for Dr. Tuberville. But it's a great honor to be able to introduce her. She's a longtime board member of SHRM-Memphis, as we all know. I've had the honor to work with her on a bunch of programs and legal day conferences, including one coming up on August 11. She is a true servant of the University of Memphis and of her students and interns. who she mentors and guides as they move forward towards their future careers. She is the director of the Avern B. Fogelman Professional Development Program, which is the career center here in Memphis for all business majors. It's a comprehensive professional development program of resume, interview, social media, LinkedIn, dining etiquette, job training skills, and so forth. There are something over 725 local employers already tied into it, with more than 1,800 students who are currently active in the program. Among Dr. Tuberville's awards and recognition, she was recognized with SHRM-Memphis's HR Educators Award last year, and the year before with the HR Champion Award. So she is our superstar. So I'm very proud to introduce Dr. Tuberville, and I will also mention that she's in charge of our, as I mentioned, August 11, a Legal Day conference coming up for SHRM-Memphis, our big HR legal event. And so I hope every single one of you will go out right after this program and register if you have not already do so. Thank you very much, Dr. Tuberville.
Dr. Tuberville, you're muted. We can't hear you.
Thank you, Jeff. We're excited to have our legal partners present every month a legal update that's timely, relevant, and important. And Jeff is always willing to give those great updates. We appreciate the work of Gabe Magaha, Cindy Eddingoff, and Jeff as it relates to keeping us legally updated and informed. Make sure you go to our COVID resource section. Jeff's one-page summary of today's work will be there, as well as his slides for this particular section. So thank you for the very kind and introduction, Jeff. Jeff is also a servant of SHRM-Memphis and the university and speaks to students frequently. So it's a great opportunity to work with him and Fisher Phillips. Today's program has been one that we've looked at in terms of looking both at the importance of using data to drive decisions. We are in a difficult time, no question, and everyone is seeking for tips and techniques to make their decision making as crystal ball solvent as possible. In terms of our speakers today, we have Gallagher Benefits and Consulting Group. They are a global organization, and I've had the opportunity to have them speak out virtually on our campus in relationship to managing employee wellness, and we've had one of their members talk about employee well-being on our recent panel. So it's with great pleasure that we welcome Gallagher Benefits and their benefits consultant, Connor Gunn. It's going to talk a little bit about Gallagher and then introduce our presenters. So Connor.
Thank you, Dr. Tuberville. I appreciate it. And just good morning, everybody. Thank you all for joining us. We really appreciate the opportunity to present today to such a good group of HR professionals. We love partnering with our SHRM chapter so that we can share best practices and best ideas with you. So, several weeks ago, I reached out to Dr. Tuberville and to see if we could help them host any chapter meetings or anything. And, we really just formed a good relationship and been able to help multiple times now. So we're really excited to be presenting today and sharing with you a little bit more information on, data-driven workforce strategies, and then, some compliance considerations as we return to work. We're really excited about this. So with that, I'll introduce our speakers today. Our second speaker that's going to talk around compliance considerations is Michael Baker. Michael joined Gallagher Benefit Services in 2014 as a compliance consultant. Building on his prior role with Gallagher as Area Vice President in Compliance Council, Michael is responsible for assisting clients with compliance questions related to health and welfare plans. Additionally, Michael is routinely invited to speak at seminars for human resource professionals, continuing legal education events, and other professional organizations. Michael is a graduate from Louisiana State University and received his Juris Doctor degree and graduate diploma in comparative law from Louisiana State University's Paul M. Hebert Law Center. So Michael's a great part of our team. He helps keep us and our clients compliant, in different aspects of their overall benefit plans and, human resource and people strategies. And so he will be talking on compliance considerations. And our first presenter will be Summer Mason. Summer joined Gallagher in November of 2016. She began her career in technology and then moved into human resources as a compensation analyst in 2000. So prior to joining Gallagher Benefit Services, she served in various compensation and benefits leadership roles within human resources departments. So she has been in your chair and a lot of your seats before, working inside of companies, not only inside of, as a consulting practice in our consulting firm. She is accomplished compensation and benefits professional with project management and experience in various industries. And she received her Lean Six Sigma Green Belt certification in 2010 and is highly skilled in leading large-scale projects with significant financial impact. Summer's primary role is to partner with people like me and benefits consultants to work with our clients with different project management and different resource and compensation projects. With her expertise in compensation, she often becomes involved in the special projects related to compensation. She graduated from Louisiana Tech University with the Bachelor's of Science in Management Information Systems, and she is a wonderful part of our team. And with that, I will hand it off to you, Summer.
All right, thanks, Connor. So before we jump into the content of the presentation, let's take a look at the agenda this morning, and we'll briefly cover Gallagher. We'll look at our COVID-19 resources. We'll review workforce analytics for the human resources professional, and we'll close out with some compliance considerations and Q&A. So with that, let's go ahead and jump into the content. Gallagher's the fourth largest benefits brokerage firm globally. We have over 32,000 employees worldwide and over 200 HR and compensation consultants throughout the U.S. 9 years straight, Gallagher has won the Ethisphere Award, and that's for being one of the most ethical companies in the world. We're very excited to receive that award. On the next slide, you'll see that Gallagher offers a wide array of consulting services ranging from health and welfare, benefits consulting to HR and compensation, HR technology, retirement, well-being and engagement, et cetera. And then on the next slide, we'd like to use a Gallagher methodology called Better Works, which is a holistic approach that we use to help organizations get better. And being better is all about perspective. We find that organizations vary greatly in the spectrum of better, and our goal is to help each one of our client organizations reach their definition of better and organizational well-being through continuous improvement of physical and emotional well-being, financial well-being, and career well-being, all while considering best practices in technology, compliance, and communications. And we realize that every organization is at a different spectrum of better. Some just need handbooks or policies and procedures or job descriptions, while others want best practices and how to lead the market and pay or, taking that next step. So we realize that every organization is at a different place of better, and just want to help them gain that next level of better. Now, considering that holistic approach, we would be remiss without considering the impact of coronavirus. Yes, it would have been great to hold these events in person, to be there today in Memphis with everyone. But our benefits and HR consulting operations have refocused to helping our clients with the most important issue at the time, which is addressing the impact of COVID and the impact of it on the workplace. We want to ensure that every one of our client organizations can weather the storm, which means that it's starting with the most important investment, it's people. On the next slide, you'll see some some resources here for you. And at Gallagher, we want you to know we're your partner during this difficult time. We're working to provide engaging content like this today, making sure that our presentations and content is accessible to everyone, everywhere, and that we can help you with your COVID-19 questions. So as you can see on the screen here, there is a link to our COVID-19 resource page. So feel free to go out and take a look and access the additional information there. So now let's jump into the topic of today's discussion, which is workforce analytics for the human resources professional. And to start off, I'd like to share a quote that I love. You know, we're drowning in information, but we're starved for knowledge, meaning that we have all the information that we need at our fingertips, but how do we utilize it and apply it? And without application, data is useless. When we compare data to knowledge, there is a progression of hierarchy. You know, it's helpful to understand that progression. You know, on the baseline, you have data that's the raw data. It's the ones and zeros. It's the coordinates. When you move up, you get to information. You know, information provides you more meaning to the raw data. And then go up higher in the hierarchy here, you've got knowledge and wisdom, which provides context and application of data and information. And as HR professionals, we want to gather our data, but more importantly, we want to make sure we move up that pyramid by applying it. And data and information is a piece of the strategic puzzle. So how do you put this puzzle piece together and build a better workplace? And how do you get a seat at the table with other departments and the C-suite? You know, first, you strategically invest in your employees' physical, emotional, financial, and professional well-being. Second, you do this by developing benefit and HR programs at the right cost structure to support a multi-generational workforce. Now, moving on to the next slide, let's take a look at why utilizing data is so important for the HR professional. You know, the idea of strategic planning in compensation and benefits is certainly not new, but measuring that plan based upon outcomes is invaluable. So when building a strategy, it's important to consider four things. First, you want to identify your key talent. You know, who is the key talent in your organization? What do you need for which individuals or which employees do you need to consider that's going to help keep the doors open so that you can still function? You know, the second thing to consider is defining your employee value proposition. What is it that you want to offer your employee base? What's going to encourage them to come to your organization? What is that proposition? Third, determine the total reward spend. So look at your compensation, benefits, and program offerings to your employees. What's the spend on that? You know, I like to use an example for, you know, we work a lot in the public sector, and oftentimes in public sector, you'll see where maybe base pay compensation is a little lower on the average compared to other industries, but their benefit offering and their time off offering is higher than the average. But when you look at the total reward spend as a whole, you know, the total equates to about the same, but you're just spending the dollars differently. So think about your total reward spend and how do you spend those dollars. And then last, establish key performance indicators or KPIs. Make sure that these are HR performance metrics that are strategically aligned with the business and the organization's mission and values. Once the strategy is determined, you know, there's a process to finding the right solution. The first step is you want to gather your data. So you're going to have some discovery period. Collecting the data. The second step is to analyze it. Once you've collected the data, look at it. You know, there's some comprehensive programs that we can help with. You can see listed here, such as a workforce evaluation that we're going to go over in a moment. But this is a way to be able to analyze the data and look at it. The third thing you're going to do is implement it. So once you've gathered it, you've analyzed it, you're going to, interpret. You're going to interpret the data and then implement it to the last step. And as you're going down this path, be sure to consider the stakeholders and champions involved throughout the process. So the first one is the CEO, which is going to have the culture, vision, and mission in mind for the organization. The second is human resources, who are going to be interested in the people and making sure that their needs are met. And then the third consideration here for stakeholder is the chief financial officer. They're going to be interested in the business side and financial side of things. So considering all of that through the process of your journey. Now, to get a little more granular, when working with data and information, we should look at our challenges first and then identify the data elements needed to address those challenges. So on the next slide, you'll see, considering that Better Works model that I talked about at the beginning of the presentation, we need to look at the priorities within the organization and how to best balance those priorities utilizing workforce data. When looking at CFO versus HR top priorities, they can be contradictory. Generally CFOs are focused on increasing revenue and reducing expenditures. And HR is generally wanting to focus on those softer priorities with a people focus, which tends to increase expenditures. So it's a balancing act between the two. But how these priorities evolved with COVID-19, that's an interesting question. Recently we've seen employers responding to the current events by considering new policies around, say, leaves and furloughs and layoffs and telecommuting and returning to the workplace. And, how do we phase in the workforce as they're returning back to the workplace? So it's still that balancing act is still there, but it shifted a little bit in those priorities to make sure that we're meeting the needs of the organization and the people within the organization. Again, looking at how the priorities have changed with COVID, we find often that employers are not ready for the situation and had to kind of build it as they went. This is the screen here. You can see a snapshot of the results of our HR policy post-COVID survey. And as you can see, 83% of the employers did not have an emergency plan in place when it surfaced. Many were not able to offer wage continuation or prepared to offer additional wages for employees assuming extra responsibilities. And 72% did not have the appropriate telecommuting policies in place to be able to have the workforce set up to telecommute. So it was a lot of building it as we went. And not only should we look at business priorities, but we should take a holistic approach and consider the whole person that comes to work every day. And this is even more important with coronavirus. Be sure to consider all aspects here. Look at the career and the financial, community, physical, social, and emotional. Look at everything. The whole person comes to work every day. So when thinking about how to attract and retain talent, think about this holistic approach. Now, when looking at recruiting and rewarding and retaining top talent, be sure to look at the career stages in your workforce. We've identified 4 career stages, the first one being entry level. This is the group that's coming in, typically, straight out of high school or college. They are interested in career growth and opportunity and increasing their income and recognition. The next level up from that is mid-career. And this employee population is interested in time off, also income, and, they're wanting that career growth opportunity. Whereas when you get to established, this is where you start to have, older families that are more established. You have children, the teenagers. They're interested in time off and spending time with their family, making sure that they have health and well-being programs in place for their family, and thinking about income projection and how are they going to be able to prepare for that next stage of retirement. And then the last stage, as you can see on the right, is the pre-retiree. And this is where, kids are out of the home. You've got the individuals that are focusing on retirement. They are interested in health and well-being programs to ensure that they have a healthy lifestyle, and then also considering saving so that they have the money to retire when they retire. And in addition to career stages, we also want to consider the generational makeup of your workplace. You know, it may vary, but traditionally these align with those career stages. You know, you would expect that the younger generation would be those entry level coming in. So there is typically some alignment, but still to think about the generations and consider the various perspectives, expectations, and motivating factors of the different generations. You know, this is very interesting to consider during COVID-19, each one of the 4 generations and how they have adapted to that. So let's look at some more specifics on the next slide. When looking at each generation, there are characteristics that differentiate them. So, for example, baby boomers, you know, they're generally they're hardworking individuals. They're motivated by position and career opportunity. They tend to be, when you're comparing across the generations, they tend to be less technically savvy than the newer generations because they didn't grow up on technology. You know, they learned later in life, but you know, they like face-to-face meetings. They like to talk in person. They're not probably as comfortable with, texting or emailing as much as maybe Gen Xers or millennials. So how do you think you go about, making sure that they're engaged during the recent events with COVID? You know, most of us have moved to work from home and are slowly transitioning back to the workplace. So how has that been for them? You know, maybe they're having challenges working from home. And how do you keep them engaged in the organization? And maybe it's through doing, Zoom meetings and video conferencing such as this. And then when you look at the Gen Xers, they tend to be very self-sufficient. They were the kids that were the first kids that grew up in what's called the latchkey generation, where both parents worked. And so there was a lot of independence that established there with having to just, be home alone, having to figure things out. And also part of, had some experience in technology through maybe middle school and high school, starting to get computers in schools and, play in Oregon Trail as they are in their computer class. So they've had some childhood experiences on computers as they transition into adulthood. So it may be a little easier for them to evolve during this time. And then you think about millennials who are traditionally those very tech savvy, they're team focused, they grew up on technology, and it may be easiest for them, but it's still, considering all the generations, very important to make sure you're thinking through all the aspects and perspectives of each to make sure you're keeping them connected and engaged within the organization through this time. Now, earlier I touched on key employees, and it's very important to identify that key employee talent. A key talent discussion should most certainly be important for any organization. We often define it as the group of employees responsible for creating a disproportional amount of value. So it's that Pareto rule, the 80-20 rule. We can also think of it in terms of critical occupations, roles that are essential to the company's performance but are tough to recruit and retain. And there's typically 4 ways that you can consider defining key talent. The first one is through position, title, or job function. So you may classify, for example, if you're an organization that is offering welding services, then welders may be a key position or job function, because without welders, you're unable to perform welding services. Another way to identify key talent is through compensation level. Some organizations will say, anyone over X dollar annual salary, we want to look at that population. Or it may be employee performance. Maybe it's your top performers. If you have a performance scale of 1 to 5, then maybe you look at your 4s and 5s that are those top performers. And the fourth way is really subjective, so it's based upon how you define it within the organization, and it may combine multiple of the ones I just went through, so a combination of those. Maybe it's position and compensation level, or maybe it's your top performers in specific titles. So it's really another way, but it can be subjective based upon the mission and values of the organization. All right, so now we're going to take a look at a few case studies. So I have 3 case studies that I want to go through in how we utilize workforce analytics to assess the organization and make some recommendations in moving forward. The first case study, you can see that there are 3 employee groups of data here. The first one is all employees, which you can see at the top, and 2 key groups at the bottom. So managers on the left, professionals on the right. And the data is displaying compensation by career stages. So what's going on at the top? You know, you can see for all employees, pre-retiree is making less compensation, which appears to be a compression issue. You know, and then for the key employees at the bottom, you see managers and professionals. And it seems to be less of an issue at the pre-retiree stage, but it's still not ideal. You would expect a mathematical progression as you move up. You know, you would expect entry level typically is, you know, lowest to pre-retiree being the highest with incremental progression for each level. So this shows us that there are some compression issues. So this was a way to just look at this at a very high level, see that there are some red flags, and then be able to dig into it deeper. You know, it shows us that there are compression issues, and this led us to performing a detailed compensation analysis, which allowed us to resolve those equity issues. So that's a great example of how you want to utilize the key employee population and making sure that you have the programs in place there, but then also for the entire employee population as well. Now on this slide, you will see that, you know, we took a look at some of the demographics across the career stages. You know, in an evaluation, when you're doing an evaluation of your workforce, you should always look at various demographics of data over career stages and slice and dice it different ways, because you want to see, you know, different things that may pop up through the comparison. This is an example of a career stage to gender comparison with a visual representation of the employee population within each segment. So as you can see, the largest population here is male mid-career. So consider what that means. Consider what means the most to that population. You know, what are they most interested in? Generally, you know, they want affordable health care for their family, you know, family coverage. And in this study, the employer looked at that and saw that, you know what, we are providing coverage for our employees, but for our employee-only population, we are covering 100%, but for the family population, we're not covering at least the benchmark. And so they actually made a decision to increase the family coverage contribution so that it would benefit the largest population within their workforce. However, there were a couple other items that came out of this one. There was discussion around diversity, equity, and inclusion, you know, making sure that you look at other areas where you could increase and have some inclusion as far as diversity. And then also along the succession planning side, you know, if you look at the entry level, as the mid-career move in and they start moving through those career stages, you've got a bench of the entry level that are coming up that can't support that headcount. So then how do we build out the succession programs to ensure that they have the bench of entry-level employees coming into the organization? And in this final case study, you know, the client wanted to understand their distribution of employees in the various career stages. And through this, we received more insights into succession planning. So in this one, the distribution of career stages were compared to the Bureau of Labor Statistics, or the BLS. And for this client, it was obvious that more investment has been made in the mid-career and established career stages. Pre-retirees were in line with the BLS benchmark, and this indicated almost 50% of the workforce was over the age 45 at the time. The client had less entry-level staff than the average BLS benchmark, and this was a concern since the entry-level population is key to creating a succession plan, so similar to the previous slide that I mentioned. The outcome in this scenario was that our client focused on effort in recruiting and retaining the entry-level employee population. So you can see, they looked at building in recognition programs, making sure that they understood the career opportunity and the progression and what competencies were required to move up within the organization and what they had to do that. And then the pay level assigned with that so that they could see the career opportunity and growth and recognition through promotional opportunities and the increase in income as well with that. Now, when looking at what should be measured, there are 5 areas that we see that are key that should be considered. First, you want to make sure you look at the workforce composition, the demographics, and I've listed some examples here on the screen, but you want to look at the demographics of your workforce and the composition of that. Next, you want to look at employee retention, look at new hires and turnover, those HR, retention metrics, making sure that you're looking at those. And then productivity, look at the revenue per employee, look at profit per employee. And then for total compensation, you want to look at your compensation and benefit programs. And so make sure that you're comparing those, such as your base pay and incentive programs or your health insurance coverage, retirement, and so forth. And then the last area is workforce distribution. And this is where you look at various comparisons of demographics across comparing with employee offerings. So you can see multiple variables there. And you want to look at this data, analyze it, and look at it year over year, set goals. If your turnover rate is 20% and the benchmark for your industry is 15%, then maybe you set an initial goal of 15% and then a stretch goal of 10%. And then you build out these metrics to then trend over time to see where you are and how do you make plans and adjustments to be able to meet that original goal and then a stretch goal. And finally, before I finish out and we open up for so a little bit of Q&A in this section, and I'll turn over to Michael, I wanted to share that we do have a tool called the Workforce Evaluation. It's a proprietary tool with Gallagher, and it helps employers in assessing and developing tailored human capital strategies, measuring those year-over-year changes that I mentioned. I gave you the resources to be able to do it yourself, but sometimes we see where organizations want us to help. We look at the people and culture, career stages, employer programs, human capital strategy, and program gaps. And it's a great way to assess where you've been, where you want to be, and how to get there. So if you're interested in wanting more information on the workforce evaluation, please let us know, and we're happy to help. So with that concludes my portion of the presentation. I think we're going to open up briefly for Q&A.
And SHRM-Memphis, we have our Q&A channel there where you can go in and post some questions, and Summer and we'll be happy to answer some questions on this section, as well as continue to ask those questions in the Q&A as Michael begins his part of the presentation in just a minute. So do we have any questions right now?
I don't see any.
Okay. All right. Well, what we'll do is we'll move on so we use the time wisely. We'll have some time at the end of Michael's presentation. So if you've had questions about Summer's talk, go ahead, send those questions in, and we'll get those toward the end. Sometimes it takes a little bit of time to get the questions in via Zoom virtually, so make sure you go ahead and do that. So thank you, Summer, for a very informative presentation, lots of detail and information on analytics, and we appreciate your time very much. Would you like to introduce Michael?
Absolutely. So now I'd like to turn it over to Michael Baker, who is going to go over some compliance considerations. Michael?
All right, perfect. And will you give me a thumbs up, those on the panel, if you can hear me?
Yes, we can hear you.
Perfect. All right, so my name is Michael Baker. I am a member of the Gallagher South Central Region and Heartland Region Compliance Council team. Our team is composed of 6 ERISA employee benefits attorneys throughout the region. I happen to sit in the Baton Rouge office, home of the LSU Tigers, the national champions. I have to put that in. I'm a LSU graduate, both undergraduate, and I received my law degree from LSU, and I'm a licensed attorney in the state of Louisiana. So with that being said, I'm hearing that Jeff is everybody's favorite attorney or most fun attorney. It's really impossible for an ERISA employee benefits attorney to be fun, but I'll try my best here on the presentation. And the way that I'm going to do that is to insert some pictures possibly on what your working from home environment looks like. I know that mine is quite the scene. I have a 5 and a 3-year-old. They are not going to be on the presentation or on the Zoom today. But I do have a dog here today, so that she might chime in throughout the presentation. I'm not going to make any promises that she won't. So in going through what we're going to discuss today, let's briefly go over the agenda that I've outlined. So we're going to begin with certain implications that really impact those employers who have a substantial workforce that is returning from, let's say, a furlough or have experienced a reduction in hours. So we're going to look at the ACA implications in regards to how those reductions or how those furloughs impacts those employees' status as full-time employees. And we'll get into that in a moment. Next, we'll go over recovering employee contributions for employees that have been placed on a furlough or returning from work from certain forms of leave also. So we'll get into that after the ACA implications. And then the next 3 really impact all employers, and these are all as a result of COVID-19. So we'll look at a potential or a mandatory extension of deadlines to where we, in essence, have to extend a certain period called an outbreak period in determining specific deadlines. Next, we'll talk about cafeteria plan relief in response to COVID-19. So some relief we've seen there in allowing employers to allow employees to make changes to cafeteria plan elections that are outside of those traditional changes that can be allowed. And then finally, I'll note or discuss certain carrier premium credits that we're seeing as a response to COVID-19, and really what we need to do with those carrier premium credits, because those or portions of those carrier premium credits can be considered ERISA plan assets, and those have specific uses that have to be considered. So going on to the next slide and the ACA implications. So under the ACA, we are all aware that applicable large employers, those employers with 50 or more full-time employees and full-time equivalent employees, must offer affordable and minimum value coverage to 95% of their full-time employees to avoid an employer shared responsibility penalty. This obviously was a big topic of discussion right after ACA rolled out. It was definitely a topic of discussion for our compliance team and the many considerations that employers have to make as it relates to ACA. And due to this time, we're not going to necessarily forget about those considerations, and it happens to come into play with COVID-19 and reductions in workforce, specifically furloughed employees, employees who have been placed on a paid leave of absence, and those employees who have been placed on also on an unpaid leave of absence or experiencing an unpaid leave of absence. So it's important to note, obviously, who are full-time employees for purposes of determining your penalty exposure under the employer shared responsibility mandate, but also under ACA reporting. So under Section 6055 on the Internal Revenue Code and Section 6056 of the Internal Revenue Code, which a lot of us would like to forget about, but those are still requirements that are there. So those are considerations that we need to make. So in looking at, we can go back to the next slide, to the previous slide. In looking at individual employees and what those employees have experienced, we need to kind of put those in 3 buckets in determining the impact on these employees as being full-time employees or not. And this specifically applies to employers who are utilizing a look-back measurement method in determining eligibility. So for furloughed employees, so an employee on a furlough, they're credited with 0 hours of service during that furlough. This thereby reduces their overall average hours worked. I think the best way to outline this is in an example. So suppose that Julie works an average of 35 hours per week from January through April. Then Julie is furloughed all of May, June, and July, and then returns to work for the remainder of the year. And upon her return from work, she averages 35 hours per week. So although she worked full-time hours for 9 months out of the year, because she had 0 hours credited for those 3 months, May, June, and July, her average would in fact drop below the full-time average, and therefore Julie, through the measurement period, would not be considered a full-time employee for the following stability period. So that's as it relates to furloughed employees. Next, we'll look at employees on paid leaves of absence. So unlike hours spent on a furlough, hours associated with a paid leave of absence, such as, and I'm not going to go into detail, hopefully Jeff and others have given presentations on the public health emergency leave or the emergency paid sick leave. So those are obviously paid leaves of absence now, and under those paid leaves of absence, hours count as hours of service during those timeframes. So therefore, a paid leave of absence will not necessarily reduce an employee's hourly average during the measurement period. The final bucket that will kind of put these individuals in, or the impact on full-time status, is going to be under special unpaid leaves of absence. So the ACA actually provides special averaging rules when there is an employee on a special unpaid leave of absence. Those special unpaid leaves of absence are absences under FMLA. They're also absences under USERRA, and also jury duty absence as well. So really, those special rules allow for 2 ways to determine an employee's average hours of service during that measurement period. And the first is by computing the average hours after excluding any unpaid leave during that measurement period, and by only using that average as the average for the entire measurement period. Next, you can treat the employees as credited with hours of service for any period of special unpaid leave during that measurement period at a rate equal to the average weekly rate at which the employee was calculated with hours of service during the weeks in the measurement period that are not part of the special unpaid leave. So in recapping, those are the 3 main considerations that we need to take into account. We need to look at individuals that have been on furlough. We have to look at individuals who are on paid leave. And we have to look at individuals who have that special unpaid leave, and determining whether or not those individuals are full-time through that time frame when they were out. Next, and as mentioned briefly, I spoke to the ACA reporting considerations. So an employee's status as full-time, also, it's obviously not also just important on the, for purposes of determining your, can you hear me? I think my Zoom possibly.
You're good. We can hear you.
You can? Okay. I just can't see the slides. So if y'all can hear me, I'll just keep on going. You can still hear me?
We can hear you. I'm not sure why you can't see the slide. It's
Yeah, it's just I have a spinning circle on my Zoom webinar screen. So as long as y'all can hear me, I think we can go ahead and keep on going.
okay.
All right, perfect. So the ACA reporting component, obviously that's going to have to be considered also. So if there's an employee who has been laid off, so that employee is no longer an employee and therefore would be reported as not an employee. And as you may recall, or as may some of you wish not to recall because it is so miserable completing employer reporting, that would be code 2A would apply to that specific scenario. Contrast that with an employee who's on a furlough or leave of absence, but continues to be an employee. Therefore, they would be treated as such for ACA reporting, even if the employee has had a break in service. All right, so now moving on to the next return to work compliance consideration and recovering employee contributions. I'll kind of give an introduction to this, and then we'll go into some of those benefits that relate to employee contributions. So employers may be thinking about whether to recoup unpaid premiums for employees who are on leave or furloughed. And as employers are considering the economic implications of COVID-19 for their employees, they may decide to pay the employee's premium of benefits while those employees who experience a furlough have a pay shortage due to reduced hours, for instance. This is permissible. Other employers may choose not to or have chosen not to terminate coverage, even though employees did not make their premium payments during furlough or were unable to make payments during periods of reduced hours. So taking this into consideration, many employers find themselves seeking to recover missed premium payments from their employees once hours return to normal or when a furlough ends. So historically, employers subject to FMLA have wrestled with the decision of whether or not to recover missed employee premium contributions for coverage provided during unpaid FMLA leave. So typically, employers capture these missed premium payments through additional salary reductions from employee paychecks after they return. But whether an employer will take those steps when employees return from COVID-19 related leaves of absence may depend on their past experience or nightmares with recouping payments from employees. So we're going to look at some of those contribution recoupment methods and how those apply to certain benefits. So the first benefit that we'll discuss are going to be health benefits. So as we think about missed contributions, let's look at some considerations under the health benefit header. So the IRS has not provided specific guidance regarding situations where due to furlough or reduction in hours, there's a pay shortage without loss of eligibility. It has issued, however, regulations that address how employees may pay for benefits during FMLA leave. So we'll go through those allowable methods. So first will be the prepayment with a salary reduction. This is not really feasible in the current situation that we're seeing ourselves in, since the stay-at-home orders, for instance, were not anticipated in advance. The next option we see is a pay-as-you-go method on an after-tax basis, or from paid leave on a pre-tax basis. And then finally, the third option is a catch-up salary reduction upon return from leave. These again are the options available for FMLA leave, and with that, it seems reasonable to apply these similar concepts or options in the non-FMLA context as well. The catch-up contribution is probably the most useful since the pay shortage was so unexpected and occurred so suddenly that employees couldn't plan for it. The risk, obviously, with the catch-up contribution is that the employer may not be able to recoup the contribution if the employee does not return to work or is unable to make the payment. It's very important with regards to what method is chosen that they are clear in communicating that chosen method to their employees and the time frame for such repayment, and that not repaying may cause a cancellation of coverage, for instance. So you might also want to communicate the priority or the order of benefit payments as well. So for instance, if payments are received, how will those be applied to outstanding premiums? Will it be first health benefits, then disability and life? Those are some examples that we'd have to look at there. All right, I just want to make sure you still can hear me. Can somebody confirm that? I still can't see the screen.
Yes, we can hear you, Michael.
Okay, great. So now moving on to the health FSA discussion and missed contributions as it relates to health FSAs. So employees who were furloughed or experience a reduction in hours as a result of COVID-19 impact on their business or business operations may have in fact lost eligibility for health FSA coverage. Additionally, other employees may not have lost eligibility, but they have failed to make their contributions during that impacted period. And in essence, upon the individual's return from work, employers should offer employees who are reinstated in their health FSAs the choice between resuming coverage at the level in effect before the leave, with the unpaid premium payments being made up, or resuming coverage at the level that is reduced with premium payments at the level that was in effect before the leave. Now let's look at, I'm gonna skip through a little bit of the information on the health FSAs just in sake of time so I can get through the material. But now let's look at dependent care FSAs. So unlike health coverage, given their nature, dependent care assistance programs, or I'm going to refer to them as DCAPs for the remainder of the presentation, are less likely to raise an issue with respect to missed contributions. But I am going to mention a few things here that we need to keep in mind. So because eligibility for a DCAP is typically based on working at least a specified number of hours per week, employees on a furlough or have had a reduction in hours may have lost eligibility and thus did not have contributions to make during the impacted period. So in addition, an employee who is furloughed or experienced a reduction in hours may have had a reduced need for childcare. So particularly if a spouse or other family member became available to provide that childcare, and consequently, those individuals may have requested to have their contributions reduced during that time frame. However, if coverage continued during the impacted period and an employee missed making his or her contributions, the employer could recoup those upon the resumption of regular hours of service. I would also like to note here that while an employee is on FMLA leave or the leave provided under the Families First Coronavirus Response Act, the employee is not gainfully employed as required under the DCAP rules during the applicable period, and thus is unable to seek reimbursement for applicable expenses during that time frame. The employee would likely have wished to continue coverage, would have likely wished to discontinue coverage during the leave period. Nonetheless, the employee's coverage should be reinstated upon the return from leave in those scenarios. All right, let me do a time check. We have about 20 minutes left. Let's look at HSA contributions. So even if employee is furloughed, laid off, or experiences a reduction in hours, that employee is eligible to continue to make contributions to a HSA as long as the employee is covered by a qualified high deductible health plan. So thus, if an employee who lost eligibility under an underlying high deductible health plan as an active employee elects COBRA or other continuation coverage, then that employee is eligible to continue HSA contributions. So contributions may be made to an HSA for a particular year at any time during the year or by the due date for filing your tax return for that year. So employees really have until the due date for their 2020 federal income tax returns due in 2021 to make contributions to their 2020 HSAs. Thus, upon the resumption of services at a regular hour interval, employees may make catch-up contributions to their HSAs. In fact, employees are permitted to change the amount of their pre-tax HSA contributions through the cafeteria plan each month. That has to be allowed. Moreover, because the due date for filing the 2019 federal income tax returns is now July 15th, 2020, individuals may make contributions to their HSAs for 2019 at any time up until July 15th, 2020. Thus, this really results in employees having that additional time to fund their 2019 HSAs. All right, as it relates to non-health or FSA benefits, we typically see that group insurance contracts for life and disability, for instance, requires payments of the premium at the beginning of the coverage period, but do allow for a certain grace period, and that's generally going to be 30 to 31 days. So as a result, if the premium is not paid by the end of the grace period, coverage would terminate retroactively to the beginning of the grace period. In recognition of the administrative difficulties many employers have experienced as a result of COVID-19, a number of state insurance departments have recommended or even required that insurers use longer grace periods, such as 60 days or 90 days, in which to make necessary premium payments. So we have seen that on the non-health and FSA side. So moving on now to the certain extensions of timeframes that we've seen as it relates to what is called an outbreak period. Under recent guidance, employers will need to keep in mind that group health plans, disability, and other employee benefit packages that are subject to ERISA and the Internal Revenue Code must disregard a certain period called an outbreak period when calculating certain timeframes. So generally, the outbreak period is going to be the period from March 1st, 2020 until 60 days after the announcement of the end of the national emergency. So the outbreak period should be excluded when counting days for the following dates, and I'll mention a few of those here. So the outbreak period needs to be excluded when calculating the 30-day period or 60-day period if applicable to request HIPAA special enrollment rights. The outbreak period should be excluded when determining the election period for COVID continuation coverage, which is 60 days. And the outbreak period should be excluded when determining the date for making COBRA premium payments also. And finally, the date should be excluded or the outbreak period should be excluded in determining when an individual may file a benefit claim under the plan's claims procedures. So that's a very important update there and a direct result of COVID-19. I'll go through a brief example of how the outbreak period comes into play, and I'll do this through a HIPAA special enrollment event example. So suppose Mary is an employee who is eligible for her employer's group health plan, but she previously has declined participation in the plan. On March 31st, Mary has a baby and would like to enroll herself and the new baby into the employer's plan. Under the employer's plan, open enrollment doesn't begin until November 15th, but Mary and her baby have a special enrollment right as obviously the event has occurred. Mary may exercise her special enrollment rights for herself and the child into the employer's plan until 30 days after the end of the outbreak period. That's because of this new rule. So the special enrollment event, the birth of the child, occurred after the outbreak period began, and therefore the plan does not begin counting days for her special enrollment period following the birth of her child until the end of the outbreak period. So that's kind of how that comes into play there. I would like to note, Summer mentioned that we have our COVID resources available. Every topic that I'm going through today has a white paper or more on these specific considerations that need to be made. I can either provide those materials after the presentation, or feel free to reach out to Connor, who can then get those materials from our compliance team. So if there are questions, I know this is a lot of material to discuss, especially over a video presentation, but just note that the material is there if you want additional discussion of each one of these topics. We also saw additional relief come in the form of cafeteria plan relief. So this additional relief came via Notice 2020-29, and in essence, the IRS provided that cafeteria plans can permit employees to make changes mid-year for elections made during the calendar year 2020. These certain election changes that are allowable, and that's key here, is that they are allowable, they're not required. So you as an employer may allow these changes, but you do not have to require the changes. I'll go through some of those allowable changes that can be made to the cafeteria plan and certain events that can be made available. So some of those changes are: an employee who initially declined to enroll in a health plan coverage may be permitted to enroll in the plan. Employees who enrolled in a health plan option may be able to change to a different health plan option. An employee who enrolled in a health plan option may drop coverage, but only if the employee will immediately enroll or is enrolled in other comprehensive health coverage. Something to note there is that there will be a form of attestation that is due, noting that coverage that they will be enrolled in immediately prior to that. So it also allows or provides relief for employees to be able to enroll in health FSAs or increase or decrease existing health FSA elections. And then it also allows for employees to enroll in a dependent care FSA, or they may increase or decrease existing DCAP elections. Each of these changes, as mentioned, are permitted, but employers are not required to adopt them. However, if the employer does require or does decide to provide one or more of these mid-year election changes, they do have to adopt that in a plan amendment to their cafeteria plan. All right, so some additional relief came by way of grace period relief that applies to FSAs. So really this came as a result of unanticipated changes in the availability of some medical care and dependent care services and employees that may have unused health FSA amounts or DCAP amounts at the end of a plan year or a grace period ending in 2020. So as a result of this, employees may wish to have that time frame expanded in which to incur expenses that may be reimbursed through their health FSAs or DCAPs in order to reduce forfeitures. So in Notice 2020-29, the IRS does relax those rules and allows or permits an employer to amend its cafeteria plan to add or extend its grace period in order to reimburse expenses incurred through December 31st, 2020. So this expansion or this extension is available for plan years or grace periods that end in 2020. All right, going on to carryover amounts and an increase in that amount that we've seen also. So for 2019, the maximum dollar amount for a carryover for a health FSA was $500. Under notice 2020-33, that $500 maximum is now increasing to $550 for plan years beginning in 2020. So the question may be, how does this impact you? So an employer that already has a $500 carryover provision will need to review their cafeteria plan document to determine if an amendment will be needed. So if the cafeteria plan document limits the $500 amount or even a lesser dollar amount and the employer wants to use the $550 amount, then amendment will be required. An employer should be aware that if the change in health FSAs, obviously there could be a potential impact on an employee's ability to contribute to an HSA. So that consideration does need to be made. All right, regardless of what is adopted from the employer as it relates to the cafeteria plan relief, an employer that decides to amend one or more of its Section 125 cafeteria plans to provide for those mid-year election changes for employer-sponsored health coverage, health FSAs or DCAPs, or to provide for the extended period to apply unused amounts remaining in health FSA or DCAP, they must adopt that via a plan amendment. So an amendment for the 2020 plan year must be adopted before December 31st, 2021, and may be effective retroactively through January 2020 if certain requirements are met. The employer must also importantly inform all employees eligible to participate in the cafeteria plan of those changes that impact the plan, and that those changes would be available to all cafeteria plan participants. So you can't single out individuals who can make changes. All right, finally, I'm going to go over what we're seeing really from certain carriers, but as it relates to ERISA plan asset considerations. So there are many employers who have received premium credits. And when you receive a premium credit, this could be as a result of, let's say, elective surgeries having been postponed, just healthcare services not being utilized as much as they typically have been. And when you receive one of these premium credits or a premium reduction or a cash rebate, it's very important to look at where those funds came from, and are those funds considered ERISA plan or ERISA plan assets that have to be utilized in certain ways. So first, in looking at this, and we need to look at where the plan funds come from. So generally, there are three sources of funds. Those are going to be employer contributions. We also have participant contributions, and then certain funds, as in this case here, are distributed by insurers. So the general thought here, or the general understanding, is that employer contributions in the form of cash that come from an employer's general asset account, such as their checking account, are going to be those employer funds and not necessarily plan assets. Most contributions by participants, however, are going to be likely considered plan assets. So after we've looked at that, we need to look at what distributions from an insurer are actually plan assets. So generally, unless an insurer policy is solely paid by the employer from an employer's general assets, some portion of those funds distributed by an insurer will be a plan asset. So regardless, we do need to look at the language of the formal plan document, because that may help us determine what funds become plan assets. For example, language in the plan document stating that insured dividends or refunds or similar payments will be used for the benefit of participants will likely make any of those distributions received by the plan a plan asset. Now we'll look to the portion of the money distributed by the insurer that will be plan assets. So after you've been informed that you are going to receive the insured distribution, you'll obviously have to determine what portion of that is going to be deemed plan assets. So for example, if your employees pay 50% of the premium for their coverage, then 50% of the reduction, the premium holiday, that's going to be an ERISA plan asset. Finally, you will definitely need to make sure that those ERISA plan assets are being used under those permissible uses of plan assets. So in general, those permissible uses are the payment of benefits under the plan. There could be a payment for reasonable expenses of administering the plan. There could be enhanced benefits provided, or you could return those funds to the participants in those proportions that I've discussed briefly. Lastly, obviously, if those are plan assets, then there are certain uses that are not permissible, in regards to plan assets. And those, for instance, include using, let's say, plan assets from one plan. Let's say that you have a separate dental and vision plan. If you have those plan assets coming from the dental plan, you can't necessarily utilize those for the vision plan, for instance. So that wraps up my material. I think I might be a couple minutes over, so I will turn it over to whoever is going to field the Q&As. I still can't see the screen, so I don't know what's coming in. But thank you so much for your time. I appreciate it, and hopefully I can see you all in person soon. Thank you.
Thank you, Michael. We appreciate all that very detailed information. We did have a question. Has this been approved for SHRM and HRCI credit? And the answer is yes. All of you who have attended today will get your certificate mailed out to you along with our survey and evaluation. Just want to give one last shot for any questions that might come in while I'm doing announcements, and we can keep the time moving. So Summer, if you will watch the Q&A while I'm doing a couple of announcements, then we'll move forward. We all know that this time is very uncertain and there are a lot of change strategies that are needed to be adapted. So this type of information is very valuable. I also will tell you this is also very critical information for the SHRM SCP and CP exams. So the critical thinking is really important. So very definitely it's part of professional development. So I'm going to go ahead and do a couple of announcements. If we get a question in, then we will do so. But thank you so much, Summer and Michael and Connor for arranging this program for us. And their contact information, their slides will be in our COVID resource section. So you'll have their contact information going forward as well. So thanks again. As Jeff alluded to, we have one of our signature events for SHRM-Memphis coming up on August the 11th. And as you know, that small thing called COVID did happen. And our legal conference was supposed to have been in April, and we have rescheduled it. And the good thing I want to tell you about, and we are all as a chapter at SHRM-Memphis and the board, so excited to announce that we are offering 7 SHRM and HRCI credits for that day. And it will be held either in person, hybrid, or virtual. If conditions change and we have to go fully virtual, we will do that. Our plans now are to be hybrid, and we do have a limited number of spots left in our capacity for our in-person. So register today. It's an important thing for you to be able to do that. This is a great way to get your credits. We have an awesome lineup of attorneys who will be presenting on hot topics. Our theme is really pertinent, cutting edge solutions for turbulent times in HR. When we were beginning to plan this way back in October, we had no idea how turbulent these times were going to be. So it's a very, very adaptable thing to where we are right now. So go on to the SHRM-Memphis website and register. If you registered for April 14th, the good news is you're done. You don't have to register again. So that's a wonderful opportunity. And make sure that you email us with any questions that you might have about that particular signature event. Also, big news, if you've not yet registered for the Tennessee SHRM Conference, early bird registration was extended. It ends on June 30th, so make sure that you go in and register for that. We have just about finalized all of the agenda, and there will be a number of SHRM credits available. We are looking at for the Monday through Wednesday alone, it's approximately 17 credits. And if you add our new signature event, the Diversity and Inclusion pre-conference workshop on Sunday afternoon, it will be approximately 20 plus credits for the total. Now, Randy told you early on that it's an added benefit to go ahead and register, because if you register for the conference between now and June 30th, the DNI day is included in that registration. So early bird really does catch the conference worm with this. So make sure you're registering in advance. After June 30th, the half-day Diversity and Inclusion Conference will be an extra charge. So save those dollars for another opportunity later down the line, and make sure that you have registered for our Tennessee SHRM conference. It's a great opportunity for us to show off Memphis, and you'll be getting more and more information about that. Our upcoming events, July 21st, we are having our first hybrid event with SHRM-Memphis. You can either join us in person at Owen Brennan's, which is a known Memphis and famous restaurant, or you can join us virtually. So go onto our website and you're going to be able to register there. We do want to let you know that both Owen Brennan's and SHRM-Memphis have done a great job making sure that this in-person event is safe and it's meeting all CDC standards, and we will be socially distanced, and we will have safe and healthy food service. So make sure that if this is the time when you want to venture out and network some more, please be sure that you do that. We do have a limited number of spaces for the in-person event, and our virtual event will have a number of opportunities for space as well. We will be doing this live stream so that those of you who are virtual will be able to engage just as much as we possibly can, so that you'll be a part of that. And then there will be a networking session that will be conducted virtually as well. So we want to make sure that you have every opportunity to be connected at our July 21st HR Connect. Just covered the legal conference, Save Your Seat Today. One of the things I do want to talk about is a couple of things you're going to be getting. You're going to get an evaluation of today's meeting to help us plan future events. We know that this information today was really critical. We apologize for whatever happened with Michael's slide deck not being visible. Technology, you gotta love it. There's lots of things about Zoom that works perfectly, except sometimes it will throw a little kink, so we apologize for that. You'll also be sent your certificate. And then the other thing that you will be sent in the next few days is for our July 21st HR Connect. One of the things that you noticed about Gallagher's content today was about data and data that they had collected from a number of their clients. Our speaker for July 21st is Austin Baker, who is the CEO of HRO Partners, and he has offered to run a specialized survey for how we are working here in Memphis specific to some of these COVID issues. So when you register, you will get a survey link so that we can really customize our program, which is a part of our HR Connect networking time, to really what's going on with us in Memphis. How are we responding? How are we coping? What are the things that we can learn from each other? So please register, and then when you do register, please make sure you complete the survey according to the directions. Just want to check and see, Summer, are there any questions in the Q&A?
No, there are not.
Okay. If you have any questions, you will have their email address. You can also contact us at info@SHRM-Memphis.org, and we can also connect you with that. We want to thank you for being with us today. And this is important that we stay connected. We know that times are different, but we also know that SHRM-Memphis is here to be a part of our community and to help. And we have a dedicated board of directors. For those of you who are logged in, we want to thank you for your service. We want to thank our hospitality VPs, Beverly Washington and Chris Van Ecken, and our communications team, Tyler Stegall and Sonia Walton, for doing a great job. The virtual setup is unique and different and requires additional time, so we appreciate all of their volunteer efforts. So thank you very much for being a part of our day today, and we look forward to seeing you or hearing from you in the near future at our July 21st or our legal conference on August 11th. Thank you.